วัสดีค่ะต้องขอบคุณคณะกรรมการตลาดหลักทรัพย์และผู้บริหารตลาดหลักทรัพย์ทีโซแล้วก็ Change Fusion ที่ให้โอกาสดิฉันมาพูดในวันนี้จริงๆก็ไม่ได้เป็นผู้เชี่ยวชาญทางด้านนี้นะคะแต่ว่าเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของทีมที่กำลังดำเนินการเขียนการวิจัยเกี่ยวกับ Social Investing ใน Southeast Asia เป็นทีมงานจากเรียน Center for Social Innovation ซึ่งเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของมหาวิทยาลัยที่สิงคโปร์ชื่อ Singapore Management University ได้รับการสนับสนุนจาก Rockefeller Foundation ค่ะแล้วต้องขอบคุณพนักงาน Change Fusion โดยเฉพาะคุณจิตพงษ์ด้วยที่มีได้ให้ความช่วยเหลือในการนำการจดโน้ตของดิฉันไปเป็น Presentation ที่สวยงามในวันนี้ค่ะเดี๋ยวขอเรียนถามนิดนึงนะคะวันนี้ว่าในผู้ฟังที่มาฟังวันนี้นี่มีผู้แทนจากบริษัทจดทะเบียนหรือตลาดหลักทรัพย์สักกี่ท่านคะขอดูนิดนึงค่ะยกมือได้ไหมคะโอเคค่ะเพราะวันนี้ที่หัวข้อที่ตั้งไว้เนี่ยก็คือ Thailand Social Investment Overview แต่อยากจะพูดถึงบทบาทเพิ่มเติมที่บริษัทในตลาดหลักทรัพย์หรือบริษัททั่วไปได้สามารถมีในนวัตกรรมใหม่ของ Social Investment ในเมืองไทยแล้วต้องขออนุญาตอีกอย่างก็คือขอพูดเป็นภาษาอังกฤษเพราะมันเป็นหลายปีมากแล้วที่ดิฉันได้พูด บนเวทีในภาษาไทย1และที่2เนี่ย research ที่ทำเนี่ยออกมาเป็นภาษาอังกฤษทั้งหมดเลยศัพท์ต่างๆเนี่ยถ้าจะต้องมาทับศัพท์และแปลนี่คงลำบากพอสมควรสำหรับทั้งผู้พูดคนพูดและผู้ฟังด้วยค่ะ So I'm going to switch to English now which is easier for all of us I think most of us all right so ท่านประธานกรรมการได้เอ่ยถึง social investment อันนี้ขอให้ broad overview ของ social investment social investment in recent years when people refer to social investment they tend to refer to one aspect of that which is impact investing in social enterprises globally social investment is a broader term that's used to refer to lots of different types of investment for social impact. I put probably the three most common types here. The chairman of the stock exchange referred to socially responsible investment, which is investment according to certain criteria, which may be ESG criteria, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index criteria, whatever criteria the investor chooses to use. Today we're not going to focus on that, though as he mentioned, the good news is Thailand will have its first SRI fund soon, to be managed by BBL Asset Management. But today, we're going to focus on the two types of social investment on the left-hand side of the slide, venture philanthropy and impact investment. And though there's some overlap between the two, the main difference is probably that venture philanthropy, as said by its name, seeks as its primary goal to have a social impact. And in the past, it's worked primarily with non-profit organizations. So today, it's expanded scope to include social enterprises. And it uses a combination of grants and loans, and sometimes also equity to do that. Impact investing, a trend that's caught on with quite a lot of popularity in Asia, is investment for both social and financial return. Depending on the investor, the priority of social or financial may vary, but usually the return expectation is dual. In terms of the types of vehicles for social investment, and this is a diagram, the two diagrams, the one before and this one, have been adapted from diagrams produced by EVPA, the European Venture Philanthropy Association, and the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network. So I thank Andrew and his organization for these diagrams. But just to emphasize, nonprofit organizations can also be a target for social investment. And in that sense, the objective is usually, when venture philanthropists invest in nonprofit organizations, to enable that nonprofit organization to scale its operations, to have a greater social impact, and also to be more sustainable in the long term, to either be able to produce revenues itself in some form, or else to enable it to be able to access more sustainable sources of funding. Social enterprises, I think, is a concept that may be more familiar to you because it's been quite popular recently in Thailand, but they're usually organizations set up for a social purpose, but uses a business model or techniques to achieve some of its goals and to be sustainable in the longer term. Social businesses are entities that are set up primarily as businesses, but that has as one of its objectives some social goals, which may be the creation of improved livelihoods for the community that it addresses, or the production of goods and services for that community. Asian Development Bank sometimes calls this area inclusive businesses, which is just another term, a subterm for social businesses. In Southeast Asia, social purpose organizations come from 5 origins, and we have good examples of 4 of them in Thailand. Nonprofit organizations that have transitioned to revenue-earning entities include Ma Fa Luang Doi Tung, PDA, Population Development Association,ของคุณมีชัยวิรวัฒยะ has been an international leader in advocating that nonprofit organizations earn their own revenues to be more sustainable for many years. Another major source of investable social purpose organizations, of which there are many in Thailand, is community entrepreneurs. These organizations arise usually out of communities led by a strong community leader who build businesses out of the activities of their community. And today you'll meet two examples of those leaders in the Grassroots Innovation Network and Musa. I think they're coming in to speak later to you about this. A third type of social purpose organization is, and in Thailand, this has been a phenomena that's been noticeable in recent years, is companies creating and incubating social enterprises within their organizations. And these include premier groups Bankan, the central groups ABLE, and I'll talk a little bit more about these later, and Science Cement groups work with community organizations. And 2 other types of social organizations that have become much more prevalent in recent years are those created by what we call Gen X, or New Generation Social Entrepreneurs, and that includes Kun Sunit of Change Fusion, Open Dream, Achieve, and Local Alike. I think 3 of these organizations you'll meet again later today. The last or 5th type of social purpose organization that has not been as widely seen in Thailand, but is growing in frequency in places such as India, Philippines, and a little bit in Indonesia, are social businesses that are set up by experienced businessmen who have made a career change from mainstream business to setting up a social business. One example of this is PT Rumah in Indonesia, which is a company created by a pair of former consultants, business and IT consultants, who set up PT Rumah, which provides a methodology for selling mobile minutes through small shopkeepers. And it has added financial services onto the array of services it provides to lower income communities through small shopkeepers. It has become one of the hottest business models in Indonesia today, and though it started out funded on a grant basis, it is now widely invested in by commercial investors. So why all the excitement around social investment? In the West, social investment grew around the recognition that existing pools of charitable and public money and the ways in which they're being used were not sufficient or effective in addressing the growing social problems of the world. Venture philanthropy and impact investing both grew out of movements that sought to bring to bear new sources of expertise and methodologies to addressing social problems, particularly business techniques. But this type of investment requires engagement beyond just money, particularly at this early stage of evolution in the countries in Asia. In investment terms, it's more venture capital than portfolio investment and more strategic than passive. At Lynn Center, we subtitled our paper From Charity to Change to reflect the need that social change requires more than just money. It requires the investment of other forms of capital as well to address the large and growing social problems in Southeast Asia. To understand the other types of capital that are needed, we found the framework developed by Anthony Bug-Levine over at the Nonprofit Finance Fund in the US a helpful framework. From this work, Anthony Bug-Levine calls this a complete capital framework, which he calls an integrated approach to addressing social solutions. And we've adapted the framework with reference to Southeast Asia and to Thailand. Just quickly go through. Financial capital. When people think of social investment, they think primarily of money. And of course, this is important. In the US and Europe, sources of social investment have come out of high net worth individuals and families, and particularly in the areas of venture philanthropy, they've come out of new pockets of wealth, Silicon Valley in the US and the private equity industry in Europe. Pioneering foundations have joined these new pools of money, and they've been the stimulus for activity for venture philanthropy. Impact investing's ultimate goal, of course, is to attract the mainstream money from institutional investors, which could be in the trillions of dollars, to invest in socially impactful organizations. In what I prefer to call new markets rather than emerging markets, development finance institutions such as IFC, KfW, and development banks have also been sources of funds, as have businesses and high net worth families. In Thailand, though there's been a lot of talk of social investment, the amount actually invested has been relatively very small, and almost all of it has been on a bilateral basis. That is, individuals and companies have invested in mostly startup operations to create organizations that address social problems. Change Fusion and Banpu are probably the only two organizations that have systematic programs for investing in social enterprises. However, we believe that the potential pool of financial capital for Thailand is huge. Thailand is a country that is known for Kan Tham Bun Tham Than. We're a very charitable country. The various estimates for the amount of tax-deductible donations from individuals have varied, but I've seen estimates of as much as 30 to 50 billion baht a year. That's large. That is one potential source that, if only a fraction of that could be diverted for social investment, represents a very substantial pool of money. CSR budgets, for those of you who control them in this room. I think the SET allows 2% of profits to be deducted for CSR purposes. Based on last year's corporate profits, that would amount to about 15 billion baht annually, another large potential pool of funds. Another new pool of funds are those of what we would call, has been called in other countries, mandatory CSR. In Thailand, and I'm hoping I get this right, พระราชบัญญัติส่งเสริมพัฒนาคนพิการ Yes, มาตรการ 33 ถึง 35 is expected to create about 3 billion baht in funds annually that companies can use to develop programs for disabled people. So we believe that there are significant potential sources of pools for social investment. What perhaps is needed more to develop is human capital. As mentioned previously, for social investment to really be effective in addressing Thailand's social problems, we need investment of effort and engagement. There are three rough types of human capital that we need for social investment. One is business skills, and these can be divided into two types. Core capacity development, basic strategic operational and management expertise, which represents usually multi-year ongoing engagements. And the second is periodic event-driven expertise, legal, accounting, fundraising. Social sector skills. In Thailand, we have over 10,000 civil service organizations. Thailand has one of the largest and most active social entrepreneur pools in the world. Ashoka, the Global Organization for Social Entrepreneurs, who you'll hear from this afternoon, has over 100 fellows active in Thailand. So we have a number of social sector leaders. What we lack, perhaps, is social sector leaders who can combine both operational and business skills with their strong social leadership skills. And last but not least, in the area of social investment intermediaries or professionals, we need advisors, brokers, and investment professionals to help match the business side with the social side, to put together structures and models for partnerships and collaboration. In other markets where social investment is more developed, there have been several models developed for this. One of the most effective ones has been where financial capital has been combined with capacity development skills through in-house experts and access to external consultants. Inspiring Scotland in the UK and Dasra in India are two prime examples of this, and I think Andrew will talk about that later. Second is pro bono or volunteer programs with businesses and professional firms. And thirdly is mentoring programs with senior business professionals who provide guidance to social enterprises and NPOs. In other countries, there has been a migration of experienced business professionals to social investment intermediaries, particularly consultants and bankers. And there are several organizations in India, Singapore, and Indonesia are staffed with ex-business professionals. In Thailand right now, in terms of capacity development for the social sector, this is, there are a number of training programs, business training programs for social sector organizations. But there has been little ongoing capacity building support for social organizations, whether social enterprises or nonprofit organizations. What has existed is usually on a case-by-case, ad hoc basis, on a year-by-year basis, usually from company professionals involved in company CSR projects. Social investment intermediaries are very, very active, such as Change Fusion, who's accomplished an amazing number of things, are staffed primarily from people from the social sector and probably could use some help and support from the business sector in developing certain areas. There's been a growing realization in the West or in the developed social investment market, so a lot of effort and research has been put into understanding tools and methodologies, which helps in building organizations and in building funds. Probably less research and effort has been put into understanding the underlying social problem and really trying to develop effective ways of approaching them. In Europe, US, and India, there has been a move towards thematic research, or what they call, in some cases, base research, which provides the basis for both investment and capacity development. The research focused on a specific social problem. Dasra has done research on street children, on developing the potential for girls in India, and then has identified effective solutions and solution providers, which are then funded by the organization. In Thailand, a similar development has taken place. There's been a lot of research and discussion of CSR, of social enterprise models, but not that much research done on the underlying social problems that they seek to address. And what research has taken place has been quite academic rather than action-oriented. One glaring area where there has been relatively little research done is on traditional philanthropy. Very little current research has been done on what traditional philanthropists, high net worth individuals and families are doing in the field of philanthropy. And given that this is such a large potential pool of money, some research would be worthwhile in understanding how it's distributed today. Social capital. In other markets, there has been a move to pooled funds, which can be pools of funds among investment professionals, among philanthropists, or partnerships across sectors. Public-private partnerships are becoming increasingly popular. There is a growing understanding of the need for multi-pronged interventions, that is, interventions on a lot of different fronts to effectively address social problems. There are a number of industry associations and conveners that have been set up so that practitioners in this area can discuss failures and successes. Failures are even more important to learn from than successes in some respects, because you learn what should not be done. And there are a lot of times you learn more from making mistakes than successes. And in Asia, unfortunately, because of issues of Siena and others, we're a little bit reluctant to discuss failures, but that needs to happen for us to learn. Thailand, what is striking when you look at the field is that apart from informal networks, particularly in this new generation of social enterprise and social investment professionals, Change Fusion, TISO, Ashoka, TYPN, there's relatively little discussion or formal convening groups where people can share learnings. There's really no philanthropic networks at all in operation. And there's just, in the companies or in the business sector, there's just beginning of convenings like this for people to share information about what is working and what is not. So why is this all important and relevant to you? In Southeast Asia, what we found is that compared to other regions of the world, businesses are playing a disproportionately larger role in social investment than in other areas of the world. We think there are a few reasons for this. One is that companies and businesses are probably a more natural owner or possessor of all four types of capital than any other type of organization in operation in these markets. Southeast Asia has very few professional investment, philanthropic investment advisors. It has very few professionally run foundations. And also in Thailand and in other countries in Southeast Asia, business is still, to a large extent, controlled by families, which is, so the individual and corporate wealth often goes in tandem. And so companies become the vehicle through which many families exercise their philanthropy. Because then they not only have access to the money, but they also have access to the resources that the corporate offers in executing their strategies. So the potential role of companies, potential leader in pooled funds, we mentioned CSR budgets and Matrakan 33-35, human capital, clearly in an area that is using business techniques. Corporates have the business skills necessary to build and expand social organizations. Intellectual capital, corporates know what it takes to build a business, to build industry, to build markets. They have a specific sector knowledge and market access that can be very useful to social purpose organizations. Social capital, as I mentioned, access to markets, suppliers, and corporates have influence. They have the ability to lobby governments, access to experts in their fields who can help develop technologies and strategies for social purpose organizations. And perhaps most importantly, corporates, we believe, have an understanding and a willingness for collaboration and partnerships. They understand the necessity for building industries and markets to be successful, and this willingness to collaborate and work with others, we think, is a key characteristic of successful social investment going forward. So what is needed? First of all, a shift in mentality, perhaps, in thinking, from traditional charity and CSR to venture philanthropy and social investing, from individual acts of good done for their own sake to acts of intent, and the intent being to address and solve social problems, which will require more commitment and engagement than just money. So the move from just considering financial capital to complete capital, incorporating human capital, intellectual capital, and social capital. For capacity building, models for building human capital partnerships between the business sector and the social sector. And last but not least, the willingness to move from individual to collaborative action if you're really going to address social problems at scale. I have a few case studies, if we have enough time. Do I have a few more minutes here? From other countries. I've mentioned India already. India has developed very, very strong financial intermediaries. Dasra is a giving circle, has developed giving circles where 10 to 12 high net worth individuals and families commit a fixed amount of money each year to address a social problem. Background research on the social problem is commissioned, and a selection of best practice organizations in that field are brought in. The research and these organizations are presented to the individuals, and the group as a whole chooses which organization to support. 25% of the funds are set aside by DASRA for capacity building support over 2 years. Venture philanthropy practiced by Central Square is focused squarely on education. It's set up by a former successful hedge fund manager, and it focuses on high-impact philanthropic investments. India also has a number of strong impact investment funds. Avishkar focuses on startup and early-stage enterprises in livelihood enhancement. Philippines is a country in Southeast Asia that stands out for its collaborative efforts. I'll quickly skip to maybe one that is relevant for Thailand. Philippines Business for Social Progress has been an organization that's been existent since 1970. In the beginning, it was an organization that got 50 companies to pledge 1% of its pre-tax profits to invest in initiatives to alleviate social poverty. Today, the organization has 250 members who provide contributions on sliding scale. However, more importantly perhaps, the Philippines Business for Social Progress serves as an organization where companies can combine and share learnings, and also act as a medium for coordinating corporate efforts in various initiatives, including in disaster relief activities. Business leaders are able to mobilize resources and provide advocacy and access in ways that social purpose organizations normally cannot do. A last case study from overseas, East Bali Cashews. East Bali Cashews is a cashew processor that was set up by an American entrepreneur in Bali, in one of the poorest districts of Bali. It was funded initially by family and friends, but when it sought to grow its operations, East Bali Cashews contacted IIX, which is an impact investment exchange in Singapore, who introduced them to KKR, which is a global private equity firm. KKR sent 3 private equity professionals to study EBC in Bali. These professionals produced a business plan, marketing materials, and financial projections, and also created a specific structured finance for East Bali Cashews. This resulted in East Bali Cashews raising $900,000 of funds from strategic and financial investors. The structured financing enabled it to meet multi-year financing needs, and EBC now employs 880 people and provides health and preschool care for its employees. There are a number of leading examples in Thailand as well, and I'll just touch briefly on some of them. SCG focuses on the building capacity of communities in a sustainable way through multi-year engagement with communities. In one community, they started out in building check dams, moved on to water conservation policies and facilities, and most recently, it helped them establish a community-owned operated electricity generating operation, which SCG holds 59% of. In Northeast Thailand, SCG worked with National Science and Technology Development Agency to develop new techniques for farming in areas of soil with high salinity, developing higher rice yields and alternative crops for that type of farmland. It now has built a school for sharing that knowledge and learning in the region. Central Group is an example of an organization that has worked with Matrakan 33-35 and also with organizations working with disabled people to develop a series of organizations that work with disabled people using the funds that would have been paid under Regulations 33 to 35. These include a repair and call center staffed by disabled people, and ABLE, which is a social enterprise set up to train intellectually disabled youth in the screening of T-shirts and other types of products. Central has also trained the parents of these youth to market, administer, and run the operation on their own, and it's hoped that the center can be handed over to the community in the future. Last but not least, Premier Group, which has as its theme the convening of different groups to address social problems. But some of you may have been to Pankan shops, which collects secondhand goods from individuals and from corporates and sells them in their stores to provide scholarships for children. Premier is now expanding the program and helping other social purpose organizations adopt the model. Premier Group also funds the Kon Thai Foundation, which has conducted a number of market surveys and current issues in society. Aside from being a thought leader on the subject, Kon Thai Foundation has also organized a number of physical convenings of social purpose organizations to help them seek volunteers and attract donors. So these are some of the examples from around the region in Thailand of social investment in action. And I think I've now run out of time, but if I have any questions, I'll be around this morning to answer them. Thank you.
ขอบคุณคุณวัฒนันมากค่ะ Thank you very much for คุณวัฒนันค่ะสำหรับ presentation ในวันนี้นะคะสามารถหาดาวน์โหลดได้จาก www.csri.or.th นะคะซึ่งเป็นเว็บเดียวกับที่เราใช้ลงทะเบียนนะคะ This presentation today you can download via www.csri.or.th which is the same register